Would you drill a hole in your skull to cure a headache? How about wearing jewelry made from your dead grandmother's hair? These weren't fringe ideas. They were mainstream practices that lasted centuries. Join me as we explore 5 historical traditions that prove time changes everything. Eating the dead, endocannibalism. Imagine sitting among grieving family members, the air heavy with mourning and ritual. A bowl is passed to you, filled with what looks like ash mixed with a pale paste. You're told this is all that remains of a beloved relative, and you are now expected to eat it. In some tribal communities of South America and Papua New Guinea, this wasn't a grim punishment or macabre dare, it was an act of profound respect. The Wari people of Brazil, for instance, believed that consuming the deceased prevented their soul from lingering in the physical world. They saw burial as an insult, leaving a loved one to rot in the dirt. Instead, grinding their bones into powder and ingesting them during ceremonial meals ensured their spirits became part of the living, woven into the community's essence. This wasn't mindless ritual, it was love transformed into action. In Papua New Guinea, the Fore people performed a similar practice, but with devastating consequences. The consumption of human remains unknowingly spread a fatal condition called kuru. This prion disease caused tremors, loss of coordination, and ultimately death. By the 1950s, this quiet epidemic forced authorities to outlaw endocannibalism. Today, many descendants reflect on these traditions with a mix of reverence and unease, knowing what was once sacred is now seen through entirely different eyes. Beauty in broken bones, Chinese foot binding. Picture a 5-year-old girl sitting still while her mother wraps thick layers of cloth around her tiny feet. She winces, then cries out as her toes are curled under and pressed against the sole. The goal? To slowly break the arch and create the perfect lotus foot. This wasn't considered cruelty, it was tradition, and for centuries it defined beauty and status in China. Foot binding began during the Song dynasty, practiced first among the elite, but it quickly spread across social classes. The ideal length for a bound foot was just 3 inches. A foot so small that it could fit entirely in the palm of a hand was viewed as a mark of refinement, something prized by potential suitors. The process was brutal, though. Bones would snap, flesh often became infected, and as the bindings restricted circulation, some toes fell off entirely. Still, women endured it, believing that their futures depended on this painful transformation. Mothers insisted that the sacrifice was worth it. A lotus-footed daughter could marry into wealth, elevating her family's social status. By the 19th century, Western missionaries described the practice as barbaric, sparking debates over its morality. Despite efforts to ban it, foot binding persisted in rural areas until well into the 20th century. Even today, some elderly women bear the scars, shrunken, twisted feet, haunting reminders of what beauty once demanded. Hair today, gone tomorrow. Victorian mourning jewelry. Imagine opening a delicate gold brooch from the 19th century, admiring its swirling floral patterns. But as you look closer, you realize the intricate curls and loops aren't made of metal or thread, they're woven strands of human hair. To modernize, this discovery might feel unsettling, but for Victorians, it was a deeply personal keepsake, crafted to preserve the memory of a loved one long after they were gone. Mourning jewelry, especially pieces made from hair, became a cultural phenomenon in the mid-1800s. After the death of Prince Albert in 1861, Queen Victoria wore mourning attire for decades, popularizing elaborate rituals of grief. These traditions extended to personal adornments. Hair from a deceased family member was carefully cleaned and transformed into art. Jewelers specialized in weaving hair into intricate patterns for lockets, brooches, and rings, turning intimate loss into wearable reminders. Some pieces even combined hair from multiple relatives, creating multi-generational memorials. Victorians coveted these mementos not just as personal treasures, but as symbols of skill and status. DIY enthusiasts could purchase detailed kits and instructions from catalogs, and hairwork societies hosted competitions for the most elaborate designs. Gradually faded with advances in photography, offering a less tactile way to preserve memories. Today, These pieces rest in museums, where their tenderness is often overshadowed by their eerie nature. Drilling for health, trepanation. Imagine a pounding headache so unbearable that your best option isn't a cold compress or medication, it's a hole drilled directly into your skull. This isn't science fiction, it's trepanation, one of humanity's earliest medical practices dating back thousands of years. Evidence from Neolithic times shows skulls with precisely carved holes, their edges smooth by healing, proving the patient survived the procedure. But why were humans resorting to such drastic measures? In ancient cultures, trepanation was believed to cure not just physical ailments like headaches, but also mental illnesses and spiritual disturbances. Practitioners thought the holes released bad humors, evil spirits, or other invisible forces responsible for suffering. Skulls from Peru reveal that some individuals underwent this process multiple times, marks of both repeated treatment and resilience in the face of unimaginable pain. When the practice persisted into the Middle Ages, the tools became more advanced, but no less terrifying. Physicians used hand-powered drills and primitive saws, often working with no anesthetic beyond a strong will and perhaps some alcohol. Remarkably, many patients survived, with their skulls showing signs of bone regrowth. Though trepanation became less common by the 19th century, it never entirely disappeared. Modern surgeons still perform craniotomies for specific medical reasons, like relieving pressure on the brain, but home trepanation advocates today tout it as an alternative wellness practice, a far cry from its original purpose. Dancing to death. Medieval mass hysteria. Imagine a warm summer day in 1518 in the bustling streets of Strasbourg, where townsfolk carried on with their daily lives, until one woman began to dance. At first her movements might have seemed odd but harmless, then hours passed. She didn't stop. By the end of the day, others had joined her, their feet pounding the cobblestones in a relentless rhythm. Days turned into weeks, and the crowd of dancers grew into the dozens, their faces marked by exhaustion and desperation. Some danced until they collapsed from sheer fatigue, others reportedly danced themselves to death. Collaborated, this wasn't an isolated event, it was the most infamous case of what became known as dancing mania. Similar outbreaks occurred across Europe, from Germany to modern-day Belgium and even beyond. In each case, victims often described feeling overtaken by an uncontrollable urge to move, as if their bodies were no longer their own. Local authorities, baffled and panicked, employed solutions that, in hindsight, seem absurd. Musicians were hired to play and cure the afflicted through more dancing. Unsurprisingly, this didn't work. Modern experts hypothesize that the phenomenon stemmed from ergot poisoning, caused by a fungus in contaminated grain, or mass psychogenic illness triggered by extreme stress. Centuries ago, though, it was often attributed to divine punishment or demonic possession, leaving the real cause a mystery for generations. It's fascinating how traditions once seen as essential can now feel alien or even unsettling. But they were never random. Each of these practices had a purpose rooted in its time. For the Wari, eating the dead honored ancestors. For the Victorians, weaving hair created lasting memories. And as bizarre as they may seem, these customs reveal one truth. Societies are shaped by their beliefs, no matter how strange they might appear later. So, which tradition left you speechless? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to know. And don't forget, there's plenty more to uncover, so like and subscribe for more.